Listen, America. Your panic exposes you. The moment I signed a cybersecurity pact with North Korea, your diplomats screamed reckless, your media shouted dangerous, and your think tanks declared me a threat to global order. You threatened sanctions, isolation, and regime change, old tricks from a fading empire. But let me remind you, I do not take orders from the architects of digital colonialism. While you build spyware disguised as aid and weaponized technology disguised as partnerships, we have been defending ourselves from your invisible war, your cyber strikes, your propaganda algorithms, your silent sabotage of our systems. Burkina Faso will never apologize for defending its sovereignty. Your fear only proves our freedom is unstoppable. Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you something that will shake the very foundation of what you think you know about power in the 21st century. America, yes, the so-called Great American Empire is now trembling, vibrating with fear, caught between the cybersecurity capabilities of Burkina Faso and North Korea. You heard that right, Burkina Faso. A nation you probably couldn't find on a map last year, and North Korea, the hermit kingdom your media taught you to mock. These two nations have just rewritten the rules of global warfare, and Washington is losing sleep over it. I'm going to take you inside the war room where these decisions were made. Not as some detached observer, not as a journalist scribbling notes from the sidelines, but as someone who watched the old order crumble and helped build what's rising from its ashes. What you're about to hear isn't comfortable, it isn't polite, but it's the truth that your governments have been hiding from you while they sold you fairy tales about democracy and freedom. The day we realized we were already conquered. It started on a Tuesday morning in Ouagadougou, not with bombs, not with tanks rolling through our streets, but with silence. The kind of silence that screams danger to anyone who understands modern warfare. Our banking systems went dark at 0600 hours, not a glitch, not a power failure. Every transaction, every account, every digital record gone. Erased as if our entire financial infrastructure had never existed. By 0630, our military communications network flatlined. Our generals couldn't reach their commanders. Our commanders couldn't reach their troops. We were a nation of 22 million people, suddenly deaf, dumb, and blind in the digital realm. I stood in our National Security Center watching the screens go black one by one, and I knew exactly what this was. This wasn't some random hacker collective looking for Bitcoin. This was surgical. This was professional. This was a message written in code and delivered with the precision of a cruise missile. And the signature was unmistakable. American intelligence agencies had just shown us what modern colonization looks like. You want to know what technological colonization means? It means your sovereignty exists only as long as someone in Langley, Virginia decides to let it exist. It means every keystroke, every transaction, every military communication in your country flows through servers you don't control, using software you didn't build, protected by encryption you don't understand. We thought we were independent because we had a flag and a seat at the United Nations. We were children playing at nationhood while the real power operated in the shadows of fiber optic cables and satellite networks. The Americans didn't even bother to hide it well. They wanted us to know. The attack vector, the timing, the specific systems targeted, it all pointed to one conclusion. This was Washington sending a diplomatic cable written in malware. Submit to our terms, open your resources to our corporations, align with our geopolitical interests, or watch your country return to the pre-digital age. They thought they could break us with the push of a button. They thought wrong. Within 48 hours, the vultures arrived dressed as saviors. The French came first, naturally. Our former colonial masters, still unable to accept that their empire died decades ago. Their Minister of Digital Affairs landed in Ouagadougou with a delegation of cybersecurity experts and a proposal thick enough to stop a bullet. They would restore our systems, they said. They would protect us from future attacks. All we needed to do was grant them temporary administrative access to our networks. Temporary. That word should be carved on the tombstone of African sovereignty. I sat across from their minister, watching him smile, that particular European smile that says, "We're helping you," while meaning, "We own you." He slid the contract across the mahogany table, and I read the fine print they hoped I wouldn't understand. Backdoor access to every government system. Real-time monitoring of all digital communications. French intelligence agencies granted permanent observer status in our cybersecurity operations. This wasn't assistance. This was a digital occupation dressed up as partnership. The Americans came next, without the pretense of historical friendship. Their offer was more direct, more honest in its brutality. Join their cyber defense framework, integrate our systems with theirs, accept their security advisors embedded in our government. In exchange, they'd ensure this never happened again. The threat was implicit but clear: accept American protection or face American aggression. There is no third option in their worldview. Then the European Union rolled in with their technocratic circus, a parade of bureaucrats with PowerPoint presentations about capacity building and technology transfer. They offered us their outdated cybersecurity systems technology they'd already replaced with newer versions at prices that would bankrupt us for a generation. And buried in every contract, every memorandum of understanding, every technical specification document were the same clauses: data sharing agreements, remote access provisions, mandatory software updates controlled from Brussels. They were selling us surveillance equipment and calling it security infrastructure. I watched this parade of predators, and something crystallized in my mind. The West doesn't offer partnerships, they offer vassalage with better marketing. Every handshake comes with handcuffs. Every aid package comes with strings that turn into chains. They speak about sovereignty while systematically dismantling it. They lecture about democracy while ensuring we can never make independent choices. When the North Korean delegation requested a meeting, my advisors thought I'd lost my mind for accepting. They're pariahs, they said. Dealing with them will bring sanctions, as if we weren't already being sanctioned in everything but name. As if the West's economic warfare against us was somehow more legitimate than Pyongyang's isolation. The North Koreans didn't arrive with a circus, no media presence, no grand pronouncements. Just 3 men in a secured room with a proposal that was shockingly simple: genuine technological independence. No backdoors, no surveillance, no conditions about our internal politics or our international alignments. They would help us build our own cybersecurity infrastructure, train our own experts, develop our own defensive capabilities, and they asked for only one thing in return: that we remember who helped us when the time came to choose sides in the coming global realignment. I know what you're thinking. North Korea, the nation your media portrays as a technological backwater run by a madman. Let me educate you on something your governments don't want you to know. North Korea has survived decades of the most comprehensive sanctions regime in human history. They've built nuclear weapons while cut off from global supply chains. They've developed ballistic missiles that can reach any city on Earth. And they've done it all while under constant cyber siege from the most sophisticated intelligence agencies in the world. You don't accomplish that without becoming very, very good at cybersecurity. You don't survive when the entire Western world wants you dead without learning how to protect your digital infrastructure. North Korea's isolation wasn't a weakness, it was their training ground. They built their systems assuming everyone was trying to hack them, because everyone was. They created networks that don't rely on Western technology, Western software, or Western goodwill. They achieved what every truly sovereign nation needs: technological independence. The decision wasn't difficult, it was obvious. The West offered us golden chains. North Korea offered us the tools to forge our own future. The West demanded we surrender our sovereignty for their protection. North Korea asked only that we stand up for ourselves. One path led to perpetual dependence, the other to genuine independence. I chose freedom. The signing ceremony was held in Pyongyang, not because they demanded it, but because I insisted. I wanted Washington, Paris, London, and Brussels to see it. I wanted them to watch an African leader walk into the heart of their designated enemy and emerge as a partner, not a supplicant. The Cyber Defense Cooperation Agreement was straightforward. North Korean engineers would help us build a completely independent digital infrastructure. Our technicians would train alongside theirs. We would develop our own encryption standards, our own security protocols, our own technological ecosystem that didn't depend on Silicon Valley or Shenzhen. In exchange, we would share intelligence about Western cyber operations in Africa and provide diplomatic support in international forums. The reaction was immediate and hysterical. The New York Times called it a dangerous alliance that threatens global security. Le Monde warned of digital terrorism spreading across Africa. CNN brought on expert after expert to explain why this was catastrophic for the free world. The irony was lost on none of them. The free world was terrified that someone might actually become free. The sanctions came next, as predictable as sunrise. The United States froze assets. The European Union imposed travel bans. International financial institutions suddenly discovered irregularities in our accounts. They thought they could starve us into submission. They didn't understand that we'd already been starving under their system of controlled dependency. You can't threaten a man with poverty who's already decided that dignity is worth more than their crumbs. But something unexpected happened. Other African nations started making inquiries. Quiet at first. Diplomatic back channels. Ministers asking for unofficial briefings. Then more openly. Mali requested information about our new cybersecurity framework. Zimbabwe sent a delegation to study our approach. Eritrea, already experienced in resisting Western pressure, proposed a continental cyber defense alliance. The fear in Western capitals turned to panic. Let me tell you what really terrifies them. It's not that Burkina Faso partnered with North Korea. It's what that partnership represents. It's the possibility that Africa might finally escape the technological plantation they've kept us on since independence. For decades, they controlled us through debt. When we started defaulting and finding alternative lenders, they switched to technology. They gave us smartphones designed in California, manufactured in China, running on infrastructure controlled from Virginia. They gave us social media platforms that monitored our conversations, influenced our elections, and extracted our data. They gave us digital banking systems that could be shut down with a phone call to the right office in New York. They called it modernization. It was colonization too. Our partnership with North Korea broke that model. Suddenly, there's a pathway to genuine technological sovereignty. Suddenly, African nations don't have to choose between American surveillance and Chinese surveillance. There's a third option: building our own capabilities, creating our own standards, controlling our own digital destiny. The Western monopoly on cybersecurity was built on a simple premise, that only they possess the knowledge and capability to protect digital infrastructure. That premise is now shattered. If Burkina Faso can build independent systems, so can Ghana, so can Tanzania, so can the entire continent. The emperor has no clothes, and we're pointing and laughing. I've been in meetings where Western diplomats, faces red with barely contained rage, demand to know our long-term intentions. As if we need their permission to have intentions. As if our sovereignty is something they grant rather than something we possess by right. I tell them the truth. Our intention is to never again be vulnerable to the kind of digital siege they launched against us. Our intention is to build a future where African nations control their own technology. Our intention is to ensure that the next generation of African children grows up in countries that cannot be hacked into submission by foreign powers. Make no mistake about what's happening. This isn't some distant geopolitical chess game played by suits in air-conditioned rooms far from consequences. This is war. Real war. It's not fought with bullets and bombs, though those may come when you realize you're losing. It's fought with code and cables, with satellites and servers, with the invisible architecture that controls everything from your bank account to your power grid. This is the battlefield of the 21st century, and for the first time in history, Africa is fighting back with weapons that match yours. The West has been fighting this war against us for years, decades actually, generations if we're being honest. You've been waging digital warfare against Africa since the internet was born, since the first fiber optic cables were laid, since the first satellites were launched. Every system you built, every protocol you established, every standard you set, all designed to give you permanent advantage, perpetual control, endless access to our communications, our data, our secrets, our sovereignty. They just never expected us to fight back. That was your fundamental miscalculation, the arrogant assumption that doomed your digital empire. You thought we'd remain passive targets forever. You believed we lacked the intelligence to understand what you were doing. You assumed we didn't have the capability to counter your attacks. You were certain we'd never find partners willing to help us build defenses against you. Every assumption was wrong. Every belief was false. Every certainty was an illusion born from your racist conviction that Africans couldn't compete with Western technology. They assumed we'd remain grateful recipients of their technological hand-me-downs, forever dependent on their expertise, forever vulnerable to their control. You expected us to keep thanking you for obsolete equipment sold at premium prices. You thought we'd continue accepting your aid that came with surveillance backdoors. You believed we'd stay trapped in the cycle where you controlled the technology we needed, monitored the systems we used, and exploited the dependence you created. You built your entire strategy on the assumption that we had no alternatives, no options, no way out of the trap you'd constructed. They built a global system where they held all the keys, controlled all the gates, and monitored all the traffic. Every internet exchange point designed to route through your servers. Every encryption standard created with backdoors only you could access. Every piece of critical infrastructure built to depend on your technology. Every communication protocol structured to give your intelligence agencies visibility. You constructed a digital prison so sophisticated that most nations didn't even realize they were trapped. You made the chains invisible, the walls transparent, the surveillance seamless. They thought it was permanent. You believed you'd achieved eternal dominance in cyberspace. You were convinced that your technological superiority was so vast, so insurmountable, so absolute, that no nation could ever challenge it. You assumed that controlling the foundational infrastructure of the internet gave you permanent power over everyone who used it. You thought that your head start in technology, your massive investments in research, your recruitment of the world's top talent meant your position was unassailable. You were wrong. We're proving them wrong, not with words or theories or academic papers, but with concrete action, measurable results, undeniable achievements. Every day, our engineers work alongside North Korean specialists, learning, building, creating something new. These aren't just training sessions or theoretical exercises. This is hands-on development of systems that will protect African sovereignty for generations. Young Burkina technicians who never had access to advanced cybersecurity education are now learning from experts who've defended against the most sophisticated attacks America can launch. They're not just learning defense, they're learning offense. They're not just studying your methods, they're developing counters to them. Every week, our systems become more independent, more secure, more ours. 7 days ago, we relied on Western infrastructure for certain functions. Today, we've replaced that dependency with our own sovereign systems. Next week, we'll eliminate another vulnerability. The week after that, another. We're not just building alternatives to your technology, we're building superior alternatives, faster networks that you can't throttle, stronger encryption that you can't crack, more resilient infrastructure that you can't disrupt. And with each passing week, the gap between your capabilities and our defenses grows wider. Every month, another African nation sends quiet inquiries about how they might follow our path. Not public announcements that would trigger your immediate retaliation, but discreet questions through diplomatic back channels. How did you do it? What did it cost? How long did it take? What were the risks? Can you help us? These conversations are happening across the continent, in presidential palaces in West Africa, in defense ministries in East Africa, in intelligence headquarters in Southern Africa. Leaders who once thought they had no choice but to accept your terms are now exploring alternatives. Governments that believed independence meant isolation are now witnessing our success. The digital liberation of Africa has begun, and no amount of sanctions or threats or propaganda will stop it. You can impose economic penalties, we'll find new trading partners. You can issue diplomatic threats, we'll build new alliances. You can launch propaganda campaigns, we'll tell the truth about your surveillance. You can try every tool in your arsenal, deploy every weapon you've used successfully against other nations, activate every lever of pressure you've relied on for decades, and you will fail. Because this movement is bigger than Burkina Faso, it's bigger than any single nation. It's a continental awakening to the reality of digital colonialism. The Americans are scrambling. I see it in every interaction with your officials. I hear it in every statement from your State Department. I watch it in every emergency meeting your intelligence agencies hold. You're panicking, and your panic is making you sloppy. You're making mistakes you wouldn't have made 5 years ago. You're offering concessions you swore you'd never grant. You're revealing weaknesses you've successfully hidden for decades. Your scrambling is proof that we've already won the psychological battle. You know you're losing control, and you don't know how to stop it. They're offering better deals now, sweeter terms, fewer obvious strings attached. Suddenly, the same officials who told us their terms were non-negotiable are now flexible. The same corporations that demanded full network access are now willing to discuss limited monitoring. The same intelligence agencies that insisted on backdoors are now talking about privacy protections. The same governments that threatened sanctions for partnering with your enemies are now suggesting we reconsider our alliances. Your desperation is transparent, your fear is palpable, your weakness is obvious. Too late. You had decades to offer fair terms, you had generations to build genuine partnerships, you had countless opportunities to engage with Africa as equals rather than subjects. You chose exploitation every single time. You chose surveillance over trust. You chose control over cooperation. You chose dominance over partnership. Now you want to negotiate? Now you're willing to compromise? Now you're ready to offer better terms? Too late. We've seen what you really are. We know what you really want. We understand what you really do. You can't bomb someone's house and then offer to rebuild it on your terms. You can't launch a cyber attack that crashes our banking system, freezes our government operations, and exposes our military secrets, and then present yourself as a security partner. You can't spend months trying to destabilize our government, overthrow our leadership, and install your puppets, and then suggest we should trust you with access to our digital infrastructure. The audacity of your offer reveals the depth of your contempt for our intelligence. You can't launch a cyber attack and then present yourself as a security partner. This is like an arsonist offering to sell fire insurance. This is like a thief offering to install your security system. This is like a virus offering to be your vaccine. We're not stupid. We're not desperate enough to accept protection from our attacker. We're not so isolated that we have no alternatives. We found partners who respect our sovereignty. We built systems that don't require your participation. We created defenses that work against you, not for you. We've seen behind the curtain. We know how the trick works. We understand the illusion you've been maintaining. Your cybersecurity partnerships are surveillance programs. Your technical assistance is espionage infrastructure. Your capacity building is dependency creation. Your security cooperation is sovereignty surrender. We've seen the contracts you offered other nations. We've read the terms you demanded. We've examined the systems you installed. We know exactly what you do once you gain access to a nation's networks. We know how the trick works. The initial offer sounds reasonable. The terms seem fair. The technology appears legitimate. But buried in the fine print are the clauses that grant you permanent access. Hidden in the technical specifications are the backdoors that let you monitor everything. Concealed in the maintenance agreements are the requirements that keep you involved forever. We've studied your playbook. We've analyzed your tactics. We've decoded your methods. We know exactly how you transform partnerships into permanent surveillance. We're not interested in better slavery. You can make the chains lighter. You can polish the shackles until they shine. You can disguise the collar as jewelry, but it's still slavery. Dependence by any other name is still dependence. Surveillance with better terms is still surveillance. Control with softer language is still control. We're not interested in negotiating the conditions of our subordination. We're interested in eliminating our subordination entirely. We want freedom. Real freedom. Not the freedom to choose between different Western surveillance systems. Not the freedom to select which American company monitors our communications. Not the freedom to decide which European intelligence agency accesses our data. We want genuine sovereignty over our digital infrastructure. We want actual control over our cybersecurity systems. We want true independence in our technological development, and we're willing to pay any price, endure any hardship, face any consequence to achieve it. Let me paint you a picture of what comes next, the future that keeps Western strategists awake at night, the nightmare scenario that your intelligence agencies have been warning about in classified briefings, the reality that your think tanks have been trying to prevent with policy papers and strategic recommendations. This isn't speculation. This isn't fantasy. This is what's already beginning to happen, the future that's being born right now while you scramble to stop it. 5 years from now, 20 African nations will have independent cybersecurity systems built with partners you tried to isolate, not just Burkina Faso, not just Mali and Niger and Chad, but Nigeria with its massive population and economic power, but Kenya with its technological innovation and educated workforce, but South Africa with its advanced infrastructure and technical capabilities, but Ghana, Senegal, Tanzania, Uganda, Ethiopia, and a dozen others, each nation learning from our example, each government building its own sovereign systems, each country choosing independence over your surveillance. Your intelligence agencies will be blind across an entire continent. The satellite imagery that once revealed everything will show you nothing but buildings and roads. The signal intelligence that once captured every communication will hear only silence or encrypted noise. The cyber access that once let you monitor every government system will hit walls you cannot penetrate. The network traffic that once flowed through your servers will route through infrastructure you don't control. An entire continent will have disappeared from your surveillance map, and you'll have no idea what's happening in the second largest landmass on Earth. Your corporations will lose access to markets representing 1.4 billion people. The cybersecurity contracts that generated billions in revenue will go to competitors you tried to destroy through sanctions. The technology sales that provided steady profits will evaporate as nations build their own systems. The service agreements that created long-term dependencies will be terminated as governments achieve independence. The market dominance you took for granted will crumble as alternatives emerge. Your economic power, built partially on technological monopoly, will weaken as that monopoly breaks. Your military will lose strategic advantages you've relied on for decades. The ability to disrupt enemy communications by attacking their networks. The capability to monitor adversary movements through their own systems. The option to disable critical infrastructure with cyber attacks. All of these advantages depend on your opponents using technology you control or can access. When nations build truly independent systems, when they create infrastructure you can't penetrate, when they develop capabilities you can't counter, your military superiority in cyberspace evaporates. Your alliances will fracture as nations realize they have alternatives. Countries that accepted your surveillance because they thought they had no choice will discover options you claimed didn't exist. Governments that submitted to your terms because they believed resistance was impossible will see proof that independence is achievable. Leaders who sacrifice sovereignty for security will recognize that genuine security requires sovereignty. Your alliance system, built partially on technological dependence, will weaken as that dependence ends. 10 years from now, the global South will have its own internet infrastructure, independent of Western control, not just alternative systems that still connect to your networks, but truly separate infrastructure that operates completely outside your reach. New fiber optic cables laid by Chinese companies and paid for by African governments. New satellite constellations launched by Russian partners and controlled by African nations. New data centers built with Iranian technology and secured by North Korean expertise. New internet exchange points that route traffic without touching your servers. A parallel digital world that you cannot access, cannot monitor, cannot control. Your standards will be rejected in favor of alternatives developed by nations you tried to suppress. The protocols you wrote to give yourself backdoor access will be replaced by standards that prioritize privacy over surveillance. The encryption algorithms you designed with weaknesses only you could exploit will be abandoned for stronger systems you cannot crack. The security frameworks you promoted to maintain your advantage will be discarded for better approaches developed by your competitors. Your technological dominance, built on controlling standards, will collapse as nations adopt alternatives. Your narrative will be rejected by populations who've seen the truth about digital colonialism. The story you've been telling that American technology represents progress, that Western systems mean security, that dependence on your infrastructure is inevitable will be recognized as propaganda. People will understand that your partnerships were exploitation. Citizens will realize that your assistance was surveillance. Populations will see that your cooperation was control. The psychological foundation of your power will crumble as the truth spreads. 20 years from now, historians will look back at this moment as the beginning of the end of Western technological hegemony. They'll identify your cyber attack against Burkina Faso as the miscalculation that triggered continental resistance. They'll point to our partnership with North Korea as the alliance that broke your monopoly. They'll recognize our success in building independent systems as the proof that alternatives were always possible. They'll understand that your empire of surveillance and control was never as permanent as you believed. This is the future you fear. This is the nightmare that keeps your strategists awake. This is the reality you're desperately trying to prevent. But it's already happening. The process has begun. The momentum is building. The transformation is underway. And no amount of sanctions, threats, propaganda, or even military intervention will stop it now. Because we're not alone anymore. Because we've proven independence is possible. Because we've shown that your monopoly can be broken. Because we've demonstrated that African nations can build their own technological capabilities. Because we've revealed that your power was always built on lies, intimidation, and the assumption that we'd never fight back. We're fighting back now. And we're winning. This is not the end. This is the beginning. The beginning of genuine technological sovereignty for Africa. The beginning of the end for digital colonialism. The beginning of a new era where nations control their own digital destiny. Welcome to the future. It doesn't belong to you anymore. Within 5 years, a dozen African nations will have independent cybersecurity infrastructure built on principles of genuine sovereignty rather than managed dependence. Within 10 years, Africa will have its own technology standards, its own encryption protocols, its own digital ecosystem that doesn't route through servers in Virginia or California. Within 20 years, the children of Ouagadougou will be teaching cybersecurity to the world, And the notion that only Western nations can protect digital infrastructure will seem as absurd as the idea that only Europeans can govern themselves. This terrifies them because it breaks their control. For the first time since the colonial era ended, Africa will possess genuine independence, not just political sovereignty on paper, but the technological capability to defend that sovereignty in practice. We won't need their permission to communicate. We won't need their approval to conduct financial transactions. We won't need their protection from threats they probably created in the first place. The global balance of power is shifting, and it's shifting away from those who thought their technological advantage was permanent. China understood this, which is why they built their own systems despite the cost and difficulty. Russia understood this, which is why they've invested heavily in cyber capabilities. Now Africa is understanding it, and that changes everything. I want to speak directly now to those in Washington, Paris, London, and Brussels who are listening to this, and I know you're listening. You're analyzing every word, looking for vulnerabilities, planning your next move. Here's what you need to understand. We're not your enemies. We never were. We simply refuse to be your subjects. We're not trying to destroy your systems or conquer your networks. We're building our own because you've proven, repeatedly and definitively, that you cannot be trusted with the power you hold over us. You had decades to be genuine partners. You chose to be overlords instead. You had countless opportunities to help us build real capacity. You chose to keep us dependent instead. You could have treated us as equals. You chose to treat us as assets to be managed and resources to be exploited. These were your choices, not ours. We're simply responding to the reality you created. The cyber attack you launched against us was meant to intimidate us into compliance. It had the opposite effect. It woke us up. It showed us, with brutal clarity, that our sovereignty only exists to the extent that we can defend it in the digital realm. Thank you for that lesson. It was expensive, but it was worth every bit of suffering it caused. You can sanction us. You can isolate us diplomatically. You can freeze our assets and ban our officials from your territories. Do your worst. We've calculated the cost of resistance, and we've decided it's cheaper than the price of submission. We'd rather be poor and free than prosperous and enslaved. That's not a negotiating position. It's a statement of values. And to those watching from other nations, particularly in Africa, Asia, and Latin America, I offer this perspective. You have a choice to make. Not today, perhaps, not tomorrow, but soon. You can continue operating within the system they've built, accepting that your digital infrastructure is ultimately controlled by foreign powers, hoping that they'll be benevolent overlords who never use that power against you. History suggests that hope is misplaced. Power always gets used eventually. The question is whether you want to be in a position to resist when it does. Or you can start building now. Start training your own cybersecurity experts. Start developing your own technological capabilities. Start creating the infrastructure of genuine independence. It's hard. It's expensive. It's going to bring pressure from those who benefit from your dependence. But it's possible. We're proving that right now. The partnership between Burkina Faso and North Korea isn't perfect. No alliance is. But it's ours. It's built on mutual respect rather than historical dominance. It's structured around genuine cooperation rather than managed dependency. It gives us tools rather than chains. That makes it revolutionary, and that's why it terrifies them. We stand now at a turning point in history. The old order, where a handful of Western nations controlled the global digital infrastructure and used that control to maintain their dominance, is crumbling. Not because we destroyed it, but because we simply stopped accepting it. The American empire isn't falling because of military defeat. It's falling because people everywhere are realizing that the emperor's power was always based on our consent, our acceptance, our willingness to use their systems and play by their rules. The moment we stop consenting, the moment we build alternatives, their power evaporates like morning mist. This is bigger than Burkina Faso. This is bigger than North Korea. This is about whether the future of humanity will be one where a small group of nations controls the digital infrastructure that governs everything, or whether we'll have a truly multipolar world where sovereignty means something more than a flag and a national anthem. I've made my choice. My nation has made its choice. We're building a future where African nations control their own technological destiny, where our children grow up in countries that cannot be hacked into submission, where our sovereignty is real, not theoretical, where we stand as equals in the community of nations, not as supplicants grateful for whatever crumbs fall from the imperial table. The West calls this dangerous. I call it freedom. They call it destabilizing. I call it justice. They call it a threat to the international order. I call it the birth of a new order, one where that old colonial phrase international community actually means the whole world, not just the countries that won World War II. The war continues. Make no mistake, this struggle is far from over. They will try to undermine us. They will fund opposition groups and support coups. They will use their media to paint us as villains and their intelligence agencies to sabotage our progress. They will do everything in their power to ensure that our experiment in digital sovereignty fails, because if we succeed, their entire system of control collapses. But here's what they don't understand. We've already won the important battle. We've proven it's possible. We've shown that African nations don't need Western permission or Western technology to build secure, independent digital infrastructure. That knowledge, that proof of concept, cannot be unlearned. Even if they somehow destroy what we've built, others will rebuild it. The seed has been planted. The idea has been proven. There's no going back. Every day, our engineers get better. Every single morning when the sun rises over Ouagadougou, I walk into our cyber defense center and see young Burkina technicians who were once targets of your surveillance becoming masters of digital warfare. They learn faster than your analysts anticipated. They adapt quicker than your playbooks predicted. They innovate beyond what your arrogant minds thought possible from Africans. Each dawn brings new skills, sharper tactics, deeper understanding of how to counter every trick you've used against us for decades. Every week, our systems get stronger. 7 days ago, we could defend against basic intrusion attempts. Today, we repel sophisticated attacks that would cripple nations still dependent on your so-called security partnerships. Our firewalls learn from every probe you send. Our encryption evolves with every attempt you make to crack it. Our networks grow more resilient with every failed assault you launch against us. What took you decades to build, we're mastering in months because we're not burdened by your bureaucracy, your corruption, your assumption that Africans can't compete with Western technology. Every month, our independence becomes more complete. 30 days ago, we still relied on some Western infrastructure. Today, we've replaced another piece of your digital chains with our own sovereign systems. Next month, we'll eliminate another dependency. The month after that, another. We're not just building alternatives to your technology, we're building superior alternatives. Systems you can't access, networks you can't monitor, infrastructure you can't control. And with each passing month, the gap between your surveillance capabilities and our defensive capabilities grows wider. And every year, more nations look at what we've done and ask themselves, why not us? That question echoes through presidential palaces across Africa, Asia, Latin America. Leaders who once thought they had no choice but to accept your terms now see proof that alternatives exist. Governments that believed independence meant isolation now witness our thriving partnerships with nations you tried to destroy. People who were told that rejecting American technology meant returning to the Stone Age now observe our advancement, our prosperity, our freedom. That question, why not us, is spreading like wildfire across the global south. That question is the death knell of digital colonialism. Because once leaders realize they don't need your permission to build their own systems, once they understand that sovereignty doesn't require your approval, once they recognize that your monopoly was always built on lies and intimidation rather than genuine superiority, your entire empire of control collapses. That question destroys the psychological foundation of your dominance. It shatters the myth that only the West can provide cybersecurity. It exposes the reality that your partnerships were always about surveillance, never about protection. I sleep well at night knowing that we've started something that cannot be stopped. While you lie awake in Washington, in Langley, in Brussels, worrying about how many more nations will follow our example, I rest peacefully. While your analysts scramble to develop new strategies to contain what we've begun, I dream of the liberated Africa we're building. While your politicians panic about losing control over a continent you've exploited for centuries, I plan our next moves with confidence and clarity. Because I know something you refuse to accept. This movement toward digital sovereignty is irreversible. The digital liberation of Africa has begun, not as a distant dream or abstract goal, but as concrete reality unfolding before your terrified eyes. Every day, another African nation questions its dependence on Western technology. Every week, another government explores alternatives to your surveillance systems. Every month, another country signs agreements with partners you've tried to isolate. The process has started, and your threats can't stop it. Your sanctions can't reverse it. Your propaganda can't slow it. The momentum is ours now. The monopoly on cybersecurity has been broken. For decades, you controlled this space completely. You wrote the standards. You manufactured the equipment. You trained the experts. You set the prices. You determined who could access advanced technology and who couldn't. You used this monopoly as a weapon, granting access to obedient nations while denying it to those who dared to resist your political demands. But monopolies built on coercion rather than genuine superiority are fragile, and we've shattered yours. Now there are alternatives. Now there are choices. Now there is competition. And you're discovering that when nations can choose freely, they don't choose surveillance disguised as security. The future belongs not to those who control the most servers, but to those who have the courage to build their own. You can own every data center in Virginia. You can operate the largest server farms in the world. You can process more information than any other nation. But none of that matters if countries refuse to route their data through your systems. None of that power helps you if nations build their own infrastructure that bypasses yours entirely. The future belongs to the brave, not the powerful, to the independent, not the dominant. To those who choose sovereignty over convenience, dignity over dependence, freedom over the illusion of security you've been selling. This is our declaration of digital independence. Just as our ancestors declared independence from colonial rule, just as previous generations fought for political sovereignty, we now declare our freedom from digital colonialism. We reject your surveillance. We refuse your backdoors. We deny your access. We will not trade our sovereignty for your obsolete equipment. We will not sacrifice our privacy for your hollow promises of protection. We will not accept subordination as the price of technological advancement. This declaration is irrevocable. This decision is final. This stance is non-negotiable. This is our refusal to be hacked into submission. You thought you could use cyber attacks to force us back into dependence. You believed that by demonstrating our vulnerability, you could make us desperate enough to accept any terms you offered. You assumed that the fear of digital collapse would drive us to surrender our sovereignty. You were wrong. Your attacks didn't break us, they taught us. Your intrusions didn't weaken us, they trained us. Your surveillance didn't control us, it motivated us. Every attack you launched became a lesson in how to defend ourselves. Every breach you achieved became a blueprint for stronger security. Every vulnerability you exploited became a weakness we eliminated. This is our answer to those who thought they could control us with the push of a button. To the CIA analysts who believed they could monitor our every communication. To the NSA operatives who assumed they could access our systems at will. To the French intelligence officers who thought they still owned us. To every Western agency that treated African digital infrastructure as their personal playground, here is our answer. No, not anymore. Never again. You can push your buttons all you want. You can launch your sophisticated attacks. You can deploy your advanced malware. You can activate your sleeper programs, but you will find nothing but walls. Walls we built. Walls we control. Walls you cannot penetrate. We are Burkina Faso. Not some abstract concept or distant nation you can ignore. We are real. We are here. We are 22 million people who refuse to be your subjects. We are engineers who learn to match your technical capabilities. We are leaders who chose sovereignty over submission. We are citizens who would rather face hardship with dignity than prosperity through dependence. We are the nation that said no when everyone expected us to say yes. We are the country that built alternatives when you said none existed. We are the people who proved that African nations don't need Western permission to achieve technological sovereignty. We are awake. For too long, Africa slept while you plundered our resources, exploited our people, and controlled our systems. For generations, we remained unconscious while you wrote the rules that kept us subordinate. For decades, we stayed dormant while you built your empire of surveillance and control. But that sleep has ended. We are awake now. We see your tactics clearly. We understand your strategies completely. We recognize your manipulations instantly. We know exactly what you're doing, why you're doing it, and how to counter it. And once awakened, we cannot be put back to sleep. We are building, not just talking about independence, building it, not just dreaming of sovereignty, constructing it, not just hoping for alternatives, creating them. Every day, we lay another brick in the fortress of our digital independence. Every week, we complete another section of infrastructure that operates outside your control. Every month, we achieve another milestone that proves African nations can compete with Western technology. We are building systems, networks, capabilities, partnerships, and a future that doesn't require your participation or approval. And we are free. This is the most important truth. Despite your sanctions, we are free. Despite your threats, we are free. Despite your propaganda, we are free. Despite your attempts to isolate us, we are free. Despite every tool you've deployed to punish us for our independence, we remain free. Because freedom isn't about having the most resources or the biggest economy. Freedom is about making your own choices, controlling your own systems, determining your own future. And by that measure, we are freer than nations with 10 times our GDP who remain chained to your surveillance networks. The old order is dying, the system where America dictated terms and everyone else obeyed. The arrangement where Western nations controlled technology and everyone else begged for access. The structure where surveillance was the price of security and dependence was the cost of development. That order is collapsing. Not someday in the distant future, but right now, before your eyes. You can see it dying in every nation that questions its reliance on your systems. You can watch it crumble in every government that explores alternatives to your technology. You can witness its death in every partnership formed with countries you tried to isolate. A new cyber order is being born, one based on sovereignty rather than subordination, one built on genuine cooperation rather than coerced dependence, one founded on mutual respect rather than imperial dominance. This new order recognizes that every nation has the right to control its own digital infrastructure. It acknowledges that cybersecurity doesn't require surrendering sovereignty to Western powers. It proves that technological advancement is possible without accepting American surveillance. This new order is emerging from the ruins of your digital colonialism, and it's more resilient, more just, and more sustainable than anything you built. And no amount of sanctions, threats, or propaganda will stop what's coming. You will impose economic penalties, we will find new trading partners. You will issue diplomatic threats, we will build new alliances. You will launch propaganda campaigns, we will tell the truth about your surveillance. You will try every tool in your arsenal to halt this transformation. You will deploy every weapon you've used successfully against other nations. You will activate every lever of pressure you've relied on for decades, and you will fail. Because this movement is bigger than Burkina Faso, it's bigger than Africa. It's a global awakening to the reality of digital colonialism, and once people see the chains, they cannot unsee them. The age of digital colonialism is ending. The era when Western nations controlled global cybersecurity infrastructure. The period when American companies monopolized advanced technology. The time when European powers could demand surveillance access as the price of partnership. That age is concluding. Not gradually, but rapidly. Not peacefully, but through resistance. Not with your permission, but despite your opposition. Every nation that builds independent systems accelerates this ending. Every government that rejects your surveillance partnerships hastens this conclusion. Every people that chooses sovereignty over dependence brings this age closer to its final breath. The age of technological sovereignty is beginning, a new era where nations control their own digital destiny, a fresh period where governments build systems that serve their people rather than foreign intelligence agencies. A different time when technology empowers independence rather than enabling surveillance. This age is dawning across the global south. It's rising in Africa, Asia, Latin America. It's emerging wherever people are tired of trading sovereignty for the illusion of security. It's beginning wherever leaders have the courage to say no to your terms and yes to genuine independence. Welcome to the future. This is what it looks like when nations refuse to be controlled. This is what happens when people choose dignity over dependence. This is the reality of a world where American dominance is no longer inevitable, where Western monopolies can be challenged, where African nations can build their own technological capabilities. This is the future you tried to prevent. This is the world you fought to stop. This is the reality you denied was possible. But it's here now, undeniable and irreversible. It doesn't belong to you anymore. The future you planned where you controlled global cybersecurity forever, where every nation remained dependent on your systems, where surveillance was universal and resistance was impossible, that future is dead. The world you designed where America dictated terms and everyone else obeyed, where Western technology was the only option, where African nations remained perpetually subordinate, that world is ending. The order you built where your intelligence agencies could access any system, where your corporations monopolized advanced technology, where your government determined who could achieve digital sovereignty, that order is collapsing. The future belongs to those who have the courage to build it themselves. And we are building it right now. without your permission, beyond your control, despite your opposition. This is not a threat. This is not a boast. This is simply the truth about what's happening in the world today. I'm not standing here making empty promises about what might happen someday in some distant future. I'm not delivering political rhetoric designed to sound impressive while meaning nothing. I'm not engaging in the kind of diplomatic theater where leaders make bold statements they don't intend to follow through on. I'm stating facts, observable, measurable, undeniable facts about the transformation currently underway across Africa and the global South. The digital liberation of Africa cannot be stopped, not by your sanctions, not by your threats, not by your propaganda, not by your military interventions, not by your economic pressure, not by your diplomatic isolation, not by any tool in your extensive arsenal of coercion. This movement has reached critical mass. It has crossed the threshold from possibility to inevitability. It has moved beyond the point where your interference can reverse it. You can slow it down temporarily. You can make it more difficult. You can increase the cost we pay for independence, but you cannot stop it. The technological sovereignty movement cannot be reversed. Once nations understand that alternatives exist, once governments realize that independence is achievable, once people recognize that your monopoly was always built on lies rather than genuine superiority, there is no going back. You cannot restore the illusion once it's been shattered. You cannot rebuild the psychological prison once people have seen the walls. You cannot reimpose dependence once nations have tasted genuine freedom. The knowledge that sovereignty is possible spreads like fire through dry grass, and you have no way to contain it. The end of your monopoly cannot be prevented. Your control over global cybersecurity infrastructure is already crumbling. Your dominance in technology standards is already being challenged. Your supremacy in digital systems is already being contested. Every day, more nations explore alternatives to your platforms. Every week, more governments build systems outside your control. Every month, more countries achieve independence from your surveillance networks. The process is accelerating, not slowing. The momentum is building, not weakening. The transformation is expanding, not contracting. This is not a threat. This is not a boast. This is not rhetoric designed to provoke or intimidate. This is not propaganda meant to inspire or mobilize. This is not exaggeration intended to make us seem stronger than we are. This is not posturing for domestic audiences or international observers. This is simply the truth about what's happening in the world today, stated plainly and without embellishment. The facts speak for themselves. The evidence is undeniable. The reality is unfolding before everyone's eyes, whether they choose to acknowledge it or not. The digital liberation of Africa cannot be stopped, not by your sanctions, not by your threats, not by your propaganda, not by your covert operations, not by your diplomatic pressure, not by your economic warfare, not by any tool in your extensive arsenal of coercion. This movement has crossed the threshold from possibility to inevitability. It has gained momentum that cannot be reversed. It has built foundations that cannot be shaken. It has created networks that cannot be dismantled. It has inspired populations that cannot be discouraged. The process has begun, and processes of this magnitude, once truly started, develop their own momentum, their own logic, their own unstoppable force. The technological sovereignty movement cannot be reversed. You cannot put this genie back in the bottle. You cannot make nations unsee what they've seen. You cannot make governments unlearn what they've learned. You cannot make people forget what they now understand about your surveillance systems, your control mechanisms, your exploitation tactics. Once populations realize that alternatives exist, once governments discover that independence is achievable, once leaders understand that your monopoly was always built on lies rather than genuine superiority, there is no going back. The knowledge spreads, the awareness grows, the movement expands, and no amount of pressure can reverse this fundamental shift in consciousness. The end of your monopoly cannot be prevented. It's not a question of if, but when. It's not a matter of whether, but how quickly. It's not about the possibility, but about the timeline. Your monopoly on cybersecurity technology, on internet infrastructure, on digital standards, on surveillance capabilities, all of it is ending. Not in some distant future, but right now, in real time, as we speak. Every day that passes sees another nation questioning its dependence on your systems. Every week brings another government exploring alternatives to your technology. Every month witnesses another country signing agreements with partners you tried to isolate. The monopoly is crumbling, and nothing you do can stop its collapse. You can rage against this reality. And you are raging. I see it in every panic statement from your State Department, in the barely controlled fury behind the diplomatic language, in the threats thinly disguised as warnings. I hear it in every emergency meeting your intelligence agencies convene, in the raised voices behind closed doors, in the desperate strategizing about how to contain what we've started. I watch it in every desperate offer you make to nations considering our path, in the sudden willingness to negotiate terms you previously called non-negotiable, in the concessions you swore you'd never grant, now being offered freely. Your rage is palpable. It fills the room when your diplomats meet with African leaders. It drips from every word in your State Department briefings. It radiates from your intelligence officials when they discuss our partnership with North Korea. It permeates your think tank papers analyzing the threat of African technological independence. It's visible in your media coverage, portraying us as reckless or dangerous. It's audible in your politicians' speeches, warning about the consequences of defying American interests. Your rage is the rage of an empire realizing it's losing control, of a hegemon discovering its power has limits, of a monopolist watching competitors emerge. Your fury is obvious. You're not even trying to hide it anymore. The diplomatic niceties have worn thin. The polite language has given way to barely concealed threats. The patient explanations have been replaced by angry demands. You're furious that a small African nation had the audacity to reject your terms. You're enraged that we found partners willing to help us build alternatives to your systems. You're livid that other nations are watching our success and asking themselves why they can't do the same. Your fury reveals how much our independence threatens your entire system of control. Your anger is transparent. Every action you take against us broadcasts your rage to the world. The sanctions you impose, the diplomatic pressure you apply, the propaganda you spread, the covert operations you launch, all of it screams your anger at being defied, at having your authority challenged, at watching your monopoly break. And your anger is counterproductive. It reveals your weakness. It exposes your fear. It demonstrates that our small nation has achieved something significant enough to provoke the fury of the world's most powerful empire. You're not accustomed to being defied. For decades, when America spoke, nations listened. When you issued demands, governments complied. When you set terms, countries accepted them. You've grown used to obedience, to submission, to nations treating your preferences as commands. You've become comfortable with your position at the top of the global hierarchy. You've gotten lazy in your dominance, assuming it would last forever. Now, when a nation like Burkina Faso says no, when we reject your surveillance partnerships, when we build alternatives to your systems, you don't know how to respond except with rage. You're not used to having your authority challenged. Your authority has been nearly absolute in the digital realm. You set the standards. You controlled the infrastructure. You determined who could access advanced technology and who couldn't. You decided which nations were trustworthy enough for certain capabilities and which weren't. Your authority went largely unquestioned for decades. Nations might grumble privately, but publicly they accepted your dominance. Now we're challenging that authority openly, publicly, successfully. And you don't know how to handle it because you've never had to before. You're not experienced with having your monopoly broken. Your monopoly on cybersecurity has been so complete, so total, so absolute, that you forgot it was a monopoly at all. You started believing it was natural superiority rather than structural advantage. You convinced yourselves that your dominance reflected genuine technological supremacy rather than control over foundational infrastructure. Now that monopoly is breaking, and you're discovering that your advantage was always more fragile than you believed. You're learning that monopolies built on coercion rather than genuine superiority can be challenged, and you're not handling the lesson well. Your rage reveals your weakness, your fear, your recognition that you're losing control. Strong powers don't rage when small nations defy them. Confident empires don't panic when their monopolies are challenged. Secure hegemons don't resort to desperate measures when their authority is questioned. Your rage is the rage of weakness, not strength. Your fury is the fury of fear, not confidence. Your anger is the anger of an empire that knows it's declining, a monopoly that recognizes it's breaking, a system of control that understands it's failing. You can deploy every weapon in your arsenal. And you will. I have no illusions about that. You will use every tool you've developed over decades of imperial dominance. You will activate every lever of pressure you've successfully employed against other nations. You will deploy every tactic that has worked for you in the past. I expect all of this. I'm prepared for all of this. We knew when we chose this path that you would respond with the full force of your coercive capabilities. Economic sanctions that cut off trade. You will impose restrictions on our exports. You will block our access to your markets. You will pressure your allies to stop trading with us. You will use your control over the global financial system to make transactions difficult. You will deploy secondary sanctions against companies that do business with us. You will try to strangle our economy to make the cost of independence so high that we're forced to surrender. This is your standard playbook. We've seen you use it against Cuba, against Iran, against North Korea, against Venezuela, against every nation that dares to defy you. Financial warfare that freezes assets. You will use your dominance over the international banking system to cut us off from global finance. You will freeze government accounts held in Western banks. You will block international transactions. You will pressure financial institutions to stop serving us. You will use SWIFT as a weapon, cutting us off from the primary system for international money transfers. You will deploy the dollar as a tool of coercion, using its role as the global reserve currency to punish nations that trade with us. This is financial warfare, and you're very good at it. Diplomatic pressure that isolates governments. You will call in favors from your allies. You will pressure African nations to distance themselves from us. You will use your influence in international organizations to marginalize our government. You will orchestrate diplomatic isolation, making us a pariah in international forums. You will convince other nations that associating with us carries costs. You will build a coalition of countries willing to shun us at your direction. You will use every diplomatic relationship you've cultivated to turn us into an international outcast. Information campaigns that demonize leaders. You will deploy your media apparatus to destroy my reputation. Your news networks will run stories portraying me as a dictator, a threat to stability, a danger to my own people. Your think tanks will publish papers analyzing the authoritarian turn in Burkina Faso. Your journalists will write articles about human rights concerns, democratic backsliding, regional destabilization. You will craft a narrative that makes me personally responsible for every problem, that portrays our independence as my personal ambition rather than our national interest. You will try to turn me into a villain that the world loves to hate. Covert operations that destabilize nations. You will activate your intelligence agencies to undermine our government from within. You will fund opposition groups. You will support protests and demonstrations. You will spread disinformation designed to turn our population against their leadership. You will recruit agents within our government, military, and security services. You will plan and possibly execute assassination attempts. You will orchestrate a coup if you think it will work. This is what you do to governments that defy you. This is your standard operating procedure for nations that refuse to submit. Cyber attacks that disrupt infrastructure. You will launch sophisticated attacks against our systems. You will try to crash our banking networks, disable our communications, breach our military databases. You will attempt to prove that our new cybersecurity systems are inadequate, that our North Korean partners can't actually protect us, that independence from your systems means vulnerability to your attacks. You will use your cyber warfare capabilities to punish us for defying you and to discourage other nations from following our example. Military threats that intimidate populations. You will move military assets closer to our borders. You will conduct exercises designed to demonstrate your power. You will make statements about protecting regional stability. You will hint at intervention if we cross certain red lines. You will use the threat of military force to create fear among our population, to make people question whether independence is worth the risk of American military action. You will leverage your overwhelming military superiority to intimidate us into submission. You have an extensive toolkit of coercion built over decades of imperial dominance: sanctions, financial warfare, diplomatic pressure, information campaigns, covert operations, cyber attacks, military threats, all refined through years of use against nations that dared to challenge your authority. You've perfected these tools through practice. You've calibrated them through experience. You've integrated them into comprehensive strategies for breaking the will of resistant nations. Your toolkit is sophisticated, extensive, and proven effective against many targets. You will use every tool. I have no doubt about this. You will not hold back. You will not show mercy. You will not limit yourself to proportionate responses. You will deploy the full force of your coercive apparatus because you understand that our success threatens your entire system of control. If Burkina Faso can successfully build independent cybersecurity systems, if we can thrive despite your sanctions, If we can maintain sovereignty despite your pressure, then every nation you currently control will start asking why they can't do the same. You must crush us to preserve your empire. You must make an example of us to discourage others. You must deploy every weapon because anything less risks the collapse of your entire system. You will activate every weapon, not just the obvious ones, but the subtle tools as well. The quiet pressure on our neighbors, the discreet conversations with our trading partners, the unofficial warnings to companies considering investment, the behind-the-scenes manipulation of international organizations, the carefully orchestrated media narratives, the strategic leaks of intelligence designed to embarrass our government, the cultivation of opposition figures who can be presented as democratic alternatives. Every weapon, every tool, every tactic, all activated, all deployed, all aimed at breaking our will and destroying our independence. You will deploy every tactic that has worked for you in the past. The same playbook you used against Cuba. The same strategies you employed against Iran. The same methods you deployed against North Korea. The same techniques you utilized against Venezuela. You will apply lessons learned from decades of regime change operations, sanctions campaigns, and coercive diplomacy. You will use what worked before, refine what didn't, and adapt your tactics to our specific circumstances. You will bring the full weight of your imperial experience to bear against our small nation.